Today, the 25th of December, was the birth date of an incredibly powerful person with connections to the divine and heralded as the savior of humanity. On this day, many will come together despite their social class or place in a hierarchy and share a meal of bread, meat, and water. This person spawned a faith that spread through the Roman Empire like wildfire, and even after the collapse of the empire that was its incubus, had a radical impact on the history of the entire world, their existence spawning an uncountable multitude of wars. This man was called Mithras. What? Were you expecting someone else? In our timeline, Paul the Apostle was one of, if not the most crucial characters in the spread of Christianity throughout Rome following the death of Jesus, going on several missions personally to spread Christianity and contributing to the first major written records of Jesus and his teachings. In this timeline, however, in his first mission to spread the Christian faith, where in our timeline he barely survived a brutal stoning by a mob, Paul instead succumbs to his injuries. Without Paul's spread of the Christian faith and Jesus' teachings, key cities like Corinth, Ephesus, and Rome would never become hubs of Christian activity, and his writings, becoming foundational bedrocks for Christian doctrine, are never written. The fledgling faith loses its greatest early trailblazer, stalling its spread beyond Jewish communities, remaining fragmented and overshadowed by neighboring beliefs, eventually relegating Christianity to the tomes of history. A single event, Paul's death at Lystra, alters the destiny of billions, reshaping the spiritual and cultural landscape of the world, and ultimately, and maybe most importantly, putting an end to Christmas. With the lack of Christianity, the main religion of Judea and some pockets of Syria would remain as Judaism. However, I don't believe that Judaism has the same appeal that Christianity did, and so up to the 200 CE, I doubt Judaism would be able to spread significantly, even along its neighboring regions, and may even decline in popularity due to continuous Roman oppression of the region. Instead, by the early 200s, Hellenism would continue to be the majority religion in the Roman Empire. However, in the absence of Christianity, another religion, sharing many similarities to it, would be allowed to prosper: Mithraism. You've probably never heard of this religion because it was an incredibly secretive cult popular among the old aristocrats, soldiers, and generals of the Roman Empire, which had a rapidly growing popularity around the time Christianity became the official religion of the empire, which ultimately led to its rapid decline in popularity before being snuffed out. Mithraism, as previously mentioned, was a religion centered around the god Mithras, which, although technically based off of the Iranian god Mithra, shared very limited similarities with them beside their names. By the 200s to 300 CE, the religion was slowly growing, even beginning to gain traction in Rome itself, and I believe that had Christianity not swept in as the dominant religion of the empire, Mithraism would have a very good chance of achieving significant popularity across the empire, with its followers based around the northern borders of the empire and stretching down into the Italian peninsula, before stopping at Naples. I believe that these specifically would be the maximum extent of Mithraic worship, as the main sectors of the population which were drawn to Mithraism were the aristocracy and the soldiers of the empire, in which legionnaires would have obviously been stationed around the borders of the empire, and the aristocracy would be present in Rome and other major cities. During this process of expanding Mithraic worship, Hellenism would also spread, though not as rapidly as the Mithraic faith, expanding across southern Gaul, Africa, and regions of Iberia. Although the Hellenic faith wouldn't spread rapidly across the empire directly, as the generations go by, significant Hellenic influences will begin to take shape in the regions of the empire which still practice their own faiths, most notably being seen in Iberia, which begins to see its gods greater resemble the gods of the Hellenic pantheon, such as Jupiter, Neptune, and Sol Invictus. In this timeline, there likely wouldn't be an emperor which openly converts to Mithraism, in an effort to not anger the staunchly Hellenic populations in the east, though there would undoubtedly be several emperors which would practice the faith in secret. The empire would still be split into two in order to more easily manage it, with the split now also following religious divisions within the empire. The West would likely adopt a Mithraic leader, while the Eastern Empire would continue having Hellenic emperors, with both attempting to spread their faiths within their half of the empire. Although many attribute the rise of Christianity to the collapse of Rome, it was only one of many factors which led to the weakening and eventual collapse of the Western Empire. In addition, although the divisions caused by the adoption of Christianity wouldn't exist and could increase cohesion within the empire, the existence of active competition between Mithraism, which wouldn't be as widely popular among the common populace as Christianity was, and Hellenism may create even more instability within the empire. Either way, the lack of Christianity would probably only delay or fast-track the collapse of the Western Empire by a few years, with largely the same states taking control, while the East remains intact. In Gaul and Britannia, it's important to note the effect of the collapse on the empire on their religions. Even in our timeline, the retreat of Roman power from Britannia led to the island abandoning Christianity, which in all aspects has more staying power than Mithraism due to its popularity among the common populace, in favor of the native Celtic pantheon. In this timeline, something similar would occur in Gaul, as the legionaries and aristocracy are forced to either leave or adopt Celtic paganism in order to keep their power and influence. Upon the Germanic migrations into these two regions, the Germanic pantheons would be introduced and widely adopted by the population, causing the German faith to become standard across Britannia and Gaul, though, as with all religions during this time period, there would be significant influence from nearby religions with local variances. The most unique region religiously would likely be Iberia and southern Gaul, which would maintain a majority of its native religion, though being significantly influenced by Hellenism. However, over subsequent generations, the religion may diverge from Hellenism slightly, due to Iberia's newfound isolation from the rest of the Hellenic world. Sorry to interrupt the video, but since I hit 3K subscribers, I'm contractually obligated by YouTube to do that annoying thing content creators do. Did you know that almost 90% of my viewers are unsubscribed? To keep up to date with all the crazy videos I have planned, please make sure to subscribe. Also, PS, I have a Discord, the link to which should be in the description of this video. Back to your regularly scheduled programming. Now would be a good time to mention that, due to the lack of Christianity, the development of Islam as a significant religion, if not entirely removed, is put into some serious doubt, as it was built off the elements of both Christianity and Judaism, meaning that if some sort of unique religion was built in Arabia, it would most likely just be considered as a sect of Judaism. If this religion does gain any significant popularity, it could be restricted to the Arabian Peninsula, meaning that Islam as a religion is also removed from this timeline, leaving the Persian and Byzantine empires as powerful players within the Middle East, allowing for Egypt to maintain its own hybrid religion, and allowing for a successor state of the Vandals to take control over much of North Africa. Even with the changes we made, it's still possible that Charlemagne or someone adjacent to him could rise up in Francia, though in this timeline continuing to follow Germanic paganism. Assuming that Francia is able to reach similar levels of control over the continent, this is what Europe would look like around 843, which seems relatively familiar, though I predict that without the unification of the German dukedoms under the mantle of the Holy Roman Empire, the East and Middle Frankian kingdoms are liable to fracture into their subsequent dukedoms upon the death of their monarchs, with potentially even regions of West Francia suffering the same fate. By this point, the religions of Europe would look something like this, being split into three main areas, with the Mediterranean being dominated by Hellenism, Italy and the Balkans being mostly Mithraic, and Western and Northern Europe being controlled by the Celtic and Germanic pantheons. Over the following centuries, the more aggressive Mithraic faith would rapidly spread into Central Europe and Poland, whereas the soft influence that Byzantium had on the Kievan Rus through trade would eventually convert most of the states to Hellenism. The Germanic faith would not undergo much expansion, though could spread slightly east due to the migration of Germans which occurred in our timeline. All other regions of Europe would likely be dominated by their own local faiths. This Europe, as a result of the lack of Christianity, would be far less developed and would continue to be dominated by tribes for far longer, as the prominence of the Christian family structure was one of the main downfalls of tribal states in our timeline. Instead, in a majority of Europe, this would be replaced with faiths which continue to promote large families, strengthening the entrenched power of the tribal leaders. This means that in much of Northern and Western Europe, feudalism will take significantly longer to develop, with the main developed feudal kingdoms being based around the Mediterranean and the Balkans, dramatically shifting the power balance we traditionally think of in medieval Europe. With Eastern Europe looking more like Western Europe from our timeline in terms of levels of development, and Western Europe being more dominated by tribal governments and having limited feudalism similar to Eastern Europe in our timeline. Eventually, feudalism would arise in the West, beginning in the south before spreading northward, but for a majority of Europe, feudalism would be a relatively new phenomenon, only being adopted around the 100 CE, leaving much of the continent significantly weaker than our timeline. By this point, this scenario has gone so far off track of any semblance of our timeline that I can't accurately predict any further than this, especially as we begin to enter the age of feudalism and the actions of individual monarchs begin to have major influence on world history. But I can predict some of the broader strokes. In this timeline, the Byzantine Empire would likely be able to continue its era of dominance for far longer, as it's not weakened by the Muslim invasions and only has to contend with the Parthian Empire, which by this point could have already collapsed due to internal struggles. The Byzantines will also still hold the title of Rome, as there is no papacy to declare any other kingdom as successors to Rome, greatly improving the legitimacy and prestige of Byzantium. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, other than the Bulgarian Empire early on, the Byzantines don't have to face any significant European empire that could challenge them, meaning that they are able to once again attempt a reconquest of Rome and other regions around the Mediterranean, securing their position as hegemon of Europe and Rome for hundreds of years to come. Much of Western Europe and Germany is divided into weak, newly feudal states, which means that any Viking incursions cannot be rebuffed easily, meaning states like the Danelaw or the Viking state of Normandy may remain dominant in their respective regions, extending the reign of the Viking Age until Western Europe can consolidate enough to challenge these Viking raids. Moving into Eastern Europe, Poland will be a lot more prosperous than it was in our timeline, with it potentially forming far earlier under Mithraic holy wars, and having very limited external foes to challenge its power in Northern Europe. Due to these factors, it's possible that Poland is able to form a significant empire, expanding into the west into the regions east of the Elbe River, and growing east into Lithuania, and even managing to conquer some Russian states. Speaking of the Russian states, the threat from Poland and support from Byzantium against a Mithraic enemy may lead to an early unification of the region under a powerful state like Kiev, merging the Kievan Rus into a formal kingdom, as opposed to the weak federation that held them together in our timeline. Even with all these changes, one thing remains constant, and that is that on the 25th of December, people from regions across Europe and from all different social classes could come together and share a meal to celebrate together in harmony. But that's all for this special Christmas episode. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more crazy videos. Comment down below any suggestions you have for future video topics. On screen now is a video which YouTube thinks you'll like. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Stay crazy!